But I'd like share what President Hinckley said. He said this. He says, in managing the affairs of the church, in fact, I'm going to let someone else do this.
In managing the affairs of the church, we have tried to set an example. We have, as a matter of policy, stringently followed the practice of setting aside each year a percentage of the income of the church against a possible day of need. I am grateful to be able to say that the church, in all its operations, in all its undertakings, and all of its departments, is able to function without borrowed money. If we cannot get along, we will curtail our program. We will shrink expenditures to fit the income. We will not borrow.
So if that's, thank you, it's Austin Westover, right? Hancock. Yeah, so the important thing is the church has set an example. They set aside a portion of their income. They don't borrow. And I think it's important for us if we can kind of follow that same thing. Let's start with I'd like to just start with a little video. Some of you have already seen this.
To provide providently, we must practice the principle of provident living. Joyfully living within our means, being content with what we have, avoiding excessive debt, and diligently saving and preparing for rainy day emergencies. May I share with you lessons in provident living that can help each of us. When we were newly wedded, I was in the Air Force, and we had missed Christmas together. When I got home, I saw a beautiful dress in a store window and suggested to my wife that if she liked it, we would buy it. Mary went into the dressing room of the store. After a moment, the sales clerk came out, rushed by me, returned the dress to its place in the store window. I said, "What happened?" She replied, "It was a beautiful dress, but we can't afford it." Whenever we want to experience or possess something that will impact us or our resources, we may want to ask ourselves, is this benefit temporary, or will it have eternal value and significance? Truthfully answering these questions may help us avoid excessive debt and other addictive behavior. When we are addicted, we seek those worldly possessions or physical pleasures that seem to entice us. But as a child of God, our deepest hunger and what we should be seeking for is what the Lord alone can provide. His love, His sense of worth, His security, His confidence, His hope in the future. I invite you to come unto Him and to hear His words when He said, "Wherefore do not spend money for that which is of no worth, nor your labor for that which cannot satisfy." May each of us also overcome worldly temptation by coming unto Him and becoming provident providers, both temporally and spiritually, for ourselves and others, is my humble prayer. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Interesting video. Thoughts on the video. Comments that just kind of struck you. One thing I saw was debt and other addictions. Isn't it interesting that debt's considered an addiction? Other thoughts? Yeah.
Since I've been married, I felt it's sometimes harder to budget while still trying to be generous to my wife or give gifts to my wife, or trying to provide her a good lifestyle while still trying to manage our budget.
Yeah. It's not easy. Other thoughts on the video? Okay. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what's coming up ahead. First thing is the booklets are due. I have had a number of people come by and get their tabs. I want to encourage you to come by and spend some time with me. I also use it some house cleaning time things. If I've got extra binders or tabs or things like that, I get rid of those as well. But I encourage you to come by. So a week from Tuesday, what you're going to do is you're just going to bring your binder with your, a nice cover page with your table of contents, the tabs, and a nice picture that has a personal financial plan of you, and if you're married, you and your spouse. And we'll just kind of check those off. But that's the main thing due in about a week. That's going to be due, and then we're going to. It's Microsoft Word. What's going on here? We're going to start handing it in. The thing to remember about the goals is the goals will not be handed in till the end of the semester. That's a whole semester project. But it's the other pieces, like, for example, we'll talk about taxes, debt and debt reduction tomorrow. About a week later, that section will be due. We'll talk about taxes. A week later, that section will be due. So here's kind of the things that we're going to work on today. Mainly, the most important thing is probably the principles of successful budgeting. But we'll talk a bit about budget, balance sheet, ratios. I also brought Quicken today, so we can help you just kind of see what we're going to be doing with Quicken. So here's our assignments. Your personal financial statements. What you'll do is you'll have a cover sheet with your current situation and action plan for each of these areas. You'll have personal balance sheets. You'll have a balance sheet at the beginning of the semester and at the end of the semester. And personal income statements. And then also, so on that cover sheet, you'll talk about, here's my current situation. Here was the beginning of the semester. Here's the end of the semester. Here's what I can do to do better. Income statements. Income statement at the beginning of the semester. Income statement at the end of the semester. Where's the easiest place to find your income statement? Right on your budget. It's that middle line of your budget, your actual, and your differences. And then your personal financial ratios. You'll have, there's only 6 ratios here. It's not like I do in my 409 class where I have to, Emily's smiling, where I have you do 350 of my favorite ratios. We only have 6 ratios that we do. And then your action plan for each of those is what can you do to do better? The whole purpose of this class is to say, okay, where are we? Where should we be? And how can we get where we want to go? Then we're going to have our section on budgets. And this section, there's a specific template that we use. And I don't care if you use Quicken, you can use Teaching Tool 31, you can use Mint.com, you can use anything you want as long as you use a budget. And that's what we'd like. So what we're going to do is, as of today, you're starting your budget for January. About the second week in February, you'll hand that in. You'll hand it in. It's a cover sheet that says, okay, what did I do well? What did I do poorly? What can I improve on? And then your, basically, it's kind of the statistics sheet, which is your budget, your actual, and your difference. So we'll hand that in about the second week in February. Then the second week in March, we'll hand in February's budget. And then when you hand your personal financial plan in April, you'll hand in March's budget. So what I found is if we will do it every month, it's a lot better, and we'll be able to accomplish. And then the action plan is what can you do to do better in the future? Now, I also want to see a 1-year spending plan that you'll hand in at the end of the semester, which is what do you expect to spend over the next 12 months? It's interesting, businesses operate on budgets. The church operates on budgets. We probably should as well. Okay, questions? Does that make sense?
Questions.
Okay.
For like the budgeting tools that we use, would you recommend, because I know for like Mint and other ones, it's tied to your credit cards or your debit cards.
Okay.
Would you recommend just using purely like cards and checking over for cash, or how would, I'm not too familiar with Mint, but if you use cash, how do you do that?
None of these programs do very well at managing cash. And I try to minimize the cash in my wallet just because if I have it there, I'll spend it. But other experiences? Yes.
I know I use Mint. You can actually say cash, and you just have to it doesn't record it. You have to manually add it in, say I saying cash, and then just add it to your budget. But you have to actually remember to do that.
I just read a blog about this. Some guy said like top 5 ways that you mess up your budgets on Mint or whatever. One of the biggest ones was just to add your cash transactions. But it's super easy. You just hit add transaction and then that's cash.
Yeah, and what I do is, like my kids, we use cash to buy lunches for my kids. So my wife will take out $300 and put, $80 for Emily and $80 to Kylie and $80 to Ashley, and we'll do that kind of stuff. So there are ways of doing it. Yes?
For us, what's helped out a lot is when you take it out, know exactly how you're going to spend that money so that you can put that right into mint. This $20 was for lunches, or this $20 was for gas, or whatever.
Okay, other thoughts? So let's start with a question. Why budget? Why do you have a spending plan? I have a good friend, and he says he doesn't like to call it a budget because that budget's such a negative word, but he calls it a spending plan. So why do you have a spending plan? Why don't you take 2 minutes in your group and let's talk about that. Okay? So why do we budget? So why do we budget? Why do you budget? Why do you budget?
Me?
Yes.
Okay. So just talk about, I also like that video. I like shopping, so if I don't have a budget, then I probably will go shopping every day and just carry out whatever I can spend. And having a budget, honestly, I still go beyond my budget, but I just go beyond like $50. I'm still there's a control.
Okay, so basically, so it's basically for control. Other reasons, yes.
It helps if you have set long-term goals, like you want to purchase a car or something. Knowing that purchase is coming up, you can save appropriately for it.
It's Tanner, Gavin Tanner. Tell me your name. Seth. Okay. Other reasons. Yes.
A lot of time businesses will go and budget so they can see what kind of finance they need to get for the future, like short term. I think you can do the same kind of thing. Say, oh, I got to get a computer, have tuition paid for it, so you can start saving up for it early. So it's not such a big surprise when you kind of pay it.
Other thoughts? Yes.
It gives you a way to kind of manage and measure your expenses, like mid-month, what you're doing.
Manage and measure expenses. Question. Why do you think the Lord has us do budgeting? Why is he making that a part of our lives? What are the things that he teaches us through the budgeting process?
Well, I think like we talked about before, like we're kind of stewards over the things
Okay.
that he blesses us with. So we're blessed with money that we earn, and we need to use it wisely.
Is there a process of creation on a budget? Kind of the spiritual creation and then the physical creation? I think it's kind of a unique thing. Same thing with our goals, spiritual creation and then physical creation. Now think about the things the Lord's trying to teach us through the lessons that we have, and budgeting becomes pretty important. So why don't we budget? If we know it's that important, why don't we budget? Take a couple of minutes and then we'll talk about that. Why don't we budget? Okay, so why don't we budget? Why don't we budget? Takes time. Oh, by the way, I'm sending around the bowling sheet. We're on day 3 now. So if you read today, you're here, you put a slash. If you're here, you put an X. Again, this is the only bowling sheet that you can get straight strikes all the way through. But I'll send that around. So it takes time. Other reason we don't budget?
It gets discouraging if you keep missing your goals.
Is a budget a perfection issue or is it a process issue? Yeah, I think it is. And some people think it's a perfection issue. I've never hit my budget to the penny. I've never hit my budget to the $10. But I have been close. Yes?
I think in a lot of cases, so like at church activities or things like that, there are a lot of opportunities to create budgets.
Mm-hmm.
But in a lot of cases, they're kind of made up.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time you go back and look at it, you're nowhere near what you thought it was going to be because you forgot such and such a bill,
Mm-hmm.
or you didn't realize you spend this much money eating out or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I think trying to predict ahead of time what it's going to be is almost artificial.
Is it really artificial or do we learn as we go along? See, the thing is, when I started with my budget, there was a lot of things I forgot. And now with the more experiences I had with my buses, now I put lots of different things in there. I think I'm a lot better at it. So the question is, because we make mistakes and we don't quite do it, do we just throw it out the door? Do we throw out the baby with the bathwater? Or do we learn from our mistakes and then we get better at it? And I think it's the latter. Yes?
I think with my wife and I, we kind of have a false sense of security from online banking. I think, we can just watch our transactions online and we'll be good. But then you don't really have any limits and controls. And when your wife wants something, you're like, yeah, sure, go for it. And you buy stuff and then you don't end up doing it.
So, a couple of professors and I got together and we put our top reasons for not budgeting. The downside is when you get finance professors together, it gets pretty crazy. So number 1, I like being poor. The meek shall inherit the earth, right? There's something in the budgeting process that those who budget accumulate more wealth. Perhaps it is due to planning, to thinking ahead, or other reasons. Regardless, research has shown that those who budget have more wealth than those who don't. Number 2, I love using my credit cards. That way I can spend my money before I earn it. And perhaps I may not have to earn it. Credit cards encourage consumption. Credit card users do not consider credit cards and other non-cash forms of payment as they do cash. Consumers who pay with credit cards and other non-cash payments are willing to pay more for an item than those who use cash only. It's interesting that those with drug habits and credit card addictions are called users. 3, I don't want more money at retirement. I want to flip burgers for the rest of my life. And I have nothing against people who serve. I have daughters who work at restaurants. According to research, those who budget have more at retirement than those who don't, as those who budget accumulate more wealth. In fact, a recent article stated that those who budget have 39% more at retirement than those who don't. Would you like to have 40% more at retirement than you would have? Yeah. 4, I don't want to budget. I want to have money-related stress in my life and marriage. It makes life more interesting. 2007 study by the American Psychological Association. Money was a major stress in 70% of those surveyed, both single and married. With a budget where both spouses plan and know where the money's going, there is less stress in life and in marriage. Number 5, I don't like times managing my money. I would rather it manage me instead. According to the Federal Reserve, 40% of American families spend more than they earn. With a budget, you plan where your money goes instead of wonder where your money goes. 6, I don't want to be happy in life. I want to be miserable like everyone else. Economic freedom is a key element of happiness. According to research, when individuals and families owe money to others, they do not have that economic freedom they desire, and research has found them to be less happy. 7, I like being in debt to other people. It helps me understand how the other 60% live, and if I was out of debt, I would be different than everybody else. In 2005, consumer debt per capita was $77,730 for a family of 4, or 55% of income for a family of 4. The average household debt in 2005 was $14,500 in non-mortgage debt. It's hard to get ahead when you're paying almost $6,000 a year in interest. Number 8, budgeting is a temporal activity, and prophets and apostles do not talk of temporal things, only spiritual things. President Spencer W. Kimball said every family should have a budget. Other prophets have said similar things. Perhaps we don't need more prophets. Perhaps we need more people who listen. So let me just share that quote. Can I get you to read that for me, please?
Every family should have a budget. Why? We would not think of going one day without a budget in this church or our businesses. We have to know approximately what we may receive and what we certainly must know what we are going to spend. And one of the successes of the church would have to be that the brethren watch these things very carefully. And we do not spend that which we do not have.
So if that's one of the reasons for the successes in the church, could it also be a reason for success in our families as well? Has the church always been out of debt? Actually, it wasn't. It wasn't until early part of the 19th century. So the church has learned as well. So let's just share a budget. So here we have our budget. So you plan here first. This is and you prioritize, and you spend, and then you've got all of it here. So I think this is our assignment. I'd like you guys had to hand this in a couple of weeks. So, question, are budgets that doesn't matter what language you're in to set a budget? And the answer is, of course not. And so we've just put a budget here. We can put, if you want to go Spanish, you can do that. Lots of different things. But the point here is the budget is a tool. And it's probably the most important tool that you'll put together to help you accomplish your goals. It's the single most important tool to help people accomplish their goals. You cannot spend your way into financial security. You cannot spend your way into financial happiness. So the question, are there better ways to budget? Let me show you the old way. The old way was this way. You have your goals here. You start with your income, pay your tithing, pay your expenses, and whatever's left over goes to your goals. What's wrong with this? Darren, what's wrong with this?
Well, I don't know, well, from the next slide, you're not paying yourself first.
Yeah.
Making saving a priority the way you go in.
What do you normally find if you use this method? There's nothing left at the end of the month. Go ahead. Yes.
I was just going to say that you typically don't save anything when
You typically don't save anything. And what we're proposing is a better way. You pay the Lord first, you pay yourself second, and then you pay your expenses. Now you've got twice the chance of accomplishing your goals. I'm amazed at the number of people that use this. You know, people who are really very successful who actually use this process. And that's the challenge. If you pay yourself first, if you take the money out at the beginning, I don't miss it. But if I wait to take it out at the end, I do. And so this is kind of the process my wife and I use. What's the easiest way to get the money? Pay yourself. You know, go ahead. Yeah. Have them taken out of your paychecks. Take it out, you know, your 401k. Take it out through automatically deductions from a mutual fund or things like this. But if you can do that, then there's a much greater chance that you'll accomplish your goals. There's a statement that the average person at the end of each month cannot account for 20% of their spending. So what I'd like you to do is my goal that I hope you guys do is to save 20%. My wife and I, when we graduated from college, we had a goal that we were going to save between 20 and 35% of every dollar we make. Is that a huge goal? Yeah, it is. But we did it. And now we're in a position to be able to do anything that we want. And so I would encourage you. At first we started off with, you know, as I was teaching this class, I said, you know, people don't have to do it. I said 10%. But I find that it's better to set a goal of 20% and you get 14% than to set a goal of, you know, 5% and you get 3%. But I encourage you to do that. I encourage you to think about it and pray about it and figure out what you want to do. In this class, we use Quicken. Let's see if that brings it up. Okay. So what I did is, Quicken I think is an important tool. The challenge is how do you manipulate all of this stuff? So you can see my spending, Clinton's last meal before dining out, Marketplace, Dairy Queen. But the nice thing about Quicken, what I like is you can actually come up here. You can see a lot of red flags there. That means I haven't done it in a couple of weeks. So now what it's doing is it's just going through each of the accounts. And so you can actually see my accounts. I have 2 credit cards, American Express and a Visa card, United Visa. We have a bank at UCCU. I do some stuff through Charles Schwab. Not because I think Charles Schwab is very good. It's just because I had a buddy who was there. Do things with my buddy. Chase is that United Visa card. So hopefully we won't have problems here. But the nice thing about this is I sit down once a week on Sunday and do my budget. And the nice thing is in about 3 minutes, everything's there. So credit cards, kids' education money, kids' mission money, brokerage accounts, all of these things here. Hopefully we're not having problems. The fact that it's taken so long on that first one. But that's the thing about this. And if you have to go through, if you have to go online to 6 or 7 different places, then it really makes it difficult. And so the key here is we're stewards over the resources that we have. And the question is, how can we be the best stewards? How can we be wisest over the resources which we have? And so something like Quicken, I think, really works well. I think it's bombing on me.
I have a question.
Yes?
I actually talked to you about this in your office, but I just wanted to know if anybody else. So, because I use Mint, and everything I have is synced to Mint perfectly. But I've had trouble in Quicken. I was wondering, because I have Bank of America before, checking account, it's such a small bank.
Yeah.
Because they pay astronomical checking account interest.
And they don't have to do anything else.
Comparatively.
Right.
But I was just wondering if any, like I see at UCCU, I mean, that seems, I mean, like, is there a workaround to get things synced up when it doesn't show?
So some banks charge you to use Quicken Direct Connect. Like UCCU doesn't, Charles Schwab doesn't, some of the smaller banks, you might have to use what's called Web Connect, which is more painful.
But it will automatically sync in.
Yeah, it will sync. Quicken, Mint, I think, has done some things better than even Quicken does. But Mint is owned by Quicken. And Mint is kind of the precursor, so they want to get you into Mint and then hopefully get you into the Quicken product. My guess is in this class, the fact that Quicken is so cheap, I mean, for $25 you get the book and Quicken too. Just try it. If you don't like it, you can always go back. We'll have a help section on Friday where I'll spend an hour, just anyone who wants a hand to attach to Quicken, download your data, and then start doing this. And so you can actually see holdings. You can see UESP, which is Utah Education Savings Plan. These are just kind of the things that I do. Here's education savings for my kids. Vanguard Group here. And just because you see it up there does not mean it's the best thing. I'm not too sure how. So my point here is it's a tool, but it's a good tool to help us. And then what we can do is we can come here, and then we can look at the individual ones. Let's go to Costco American Express. Okay, wholesale. I know that. Notice that it automatically brought in groceries. Now Costco gas, notice it automatically brought in auto fuel. Auto fuel. Wholesale reminds on groceries. Now the challenge with Costco is a lot of times you'll get clothes there, you'll get medical stuff too, so you can also work that out. Now, what I like here is we can come here and we can say, okay, let's split this. And notice that we can have up to 18 categories. And then you can also split each of those other categories. So you can have one charge, and you can have, this is clothes, and this is food, and this is medicine, and things like this. So it's really important that you kind of understand that. Again, more Costco gas. Okay, so here's my daughter Ashley's 529 plan. So every quarter they have a distribution, so they reinvested dividends of $9.55. They sold to pay some of the fees. You can see, so what we have to do is we have to accept all of these. So some of them, it's going to ask a question. We'll just do lot identification. So, and then once you've got it done, you actually accept that as well. And so the nice thing here is you can see here's the accounts. And what I do, and I'm not saying this is necessarily the right way to do it, but I have accounts for each of my kids. So here's education IRAs. Here's 529 plans, savings plans. Here's mission and education plans. And the point here is with Quicken, you saw it took us about a minute and a half And in a minute and a half, it's all up to date. Now, I still have to go back and accept all the new transactions and things like that. But it's a tool to help us to be better. And I think that's the important thing. It's a tool to help us to accomplish our goals. Questions on Quicken? Yes?
But you always need to have the CD in to have it run, or do you
No.
just download it? And
No,
then do it?
you use the CD to load it to your hard drive. And what I do is I back up Quicken to Dropbox. And then I can actually run, I've got 2 copies of Quicken. I can actually run my Quicken at home on my wife's computer from Dropbox. And then I just back it up to Dropbox every day. So whether I'm at work or at home, I can do that as well.
When are you doing the tutorial for Quicken?
Probably, it'll be Friday. Probably early Friday afternoon. Because I have classes, I teach from 8 to 11:30. So probably like 1 o'clock or noon. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you put money away for your kids' education and missions, or do they earn their own money?
You saw what we did here? You saw 529 plans, education IRAs. And then we also put some money in for weddings and things like that. So, and what we've done, and we'll spend a whole day on this, but we have our kids, if they'll earn X, we'll match it with a multiple. And so if they don't work, they don't get it. And these accounts are, I'm still the account holder. So if they don't do it, I can just move the account to another child. So what are we trying to teach? What am I trying to teach my kids? What's Heavenly Father trying to teach us? To be responsible and wise with our resources? Just by giving them money, are we responsible and wise with the resources? No. In fact, I actually had one daughter who almost didn't make it to school one semester because she hadn't saved up enough money. And the neat thing about holding her accountable, she came back to my other kids and said, you guys, you know what? Summertime, you need to work your tail end off. You don't want to be in the position I'm in right now. And you know what? That's been the best motivation for my kids. It's a lot more powerful than what we tell them, is to have one of their siblings say, you know, you've got to do that. But we'll spend a whole day talking about saving missions and education. Yes?
Could you briefly explain, how does a 529 account work?
We'll actually spend a whole day on this. 529 plans, education IRAs, custodial accounts, things like that. So let's talk about financial ratios. Okay, 49 and 50. You know, what we want to do is we want to be able to analyze our spending. Not only for ourselves, but in we helping others. And there's really 3 different questions we want to ask. Do you have adequate liquidity to meet emergencies? We told you my story last week. I didn't have adequate liquidity, and I actually had to go out and take a loan to just bridge me for one day till the money from the brokerage account hit the banks. Number 2, do you have the ability to meet your debt obligations? Number 3, are you saving as much as you think? And it's interesting, we all think at least from my experience, we all think we're saving more than we are, and we think we spend less than we do. Maybe that's pretty normal. Maybe I'm like everybody else. I teach a modeling and valuation class. And in that class, we'll take a company, and Emily knows because she did that. And we do 350 of our favorite ratios. Everything from DuPont, liquidity analysis, you know. But luckily in this class, I don't have you do all 350 ratios, but I do have you do 6. 6 ratios. 2 liquidity ratios, which are your current ratio, current assets divided by current liabilities. And ideally, why are we concerned about our current ratio? Right, well, is it insolvent, or do we have kind of the liquidity we need? So it's kind of to see how much cash we have on to cover our liabilities. Now, notice that the current ratio doesn't consider long-term assets or liabilities. But generally, what we'd like to do is see a ratio greater than 2. Number 2, we have what's called a month's living expense covered ratio. So you take your monetary assets divided by your monthly living expenses. So how many, if you lost your job, how many months could you survive on just the cash you have in your bank? I know that. I have lost my job. So those are important. So ideally what you'd like is 3 to 6 months, which is recommended. Ideally it should be equal to how long it would take you to find a job. Then we have debt obligations, 2 of them here, debt ratio and long-term debt coverage ratio. Your debt ratio is just total liabilities divided by total assets. What percent of your assets are funded by debt? And ideally over time this should go to 0. A 0 debt ratio is a great goal. I have a 0 debt ratio except for my monthly liabilities. And it's a nice place to be. And long-term debt coverage ratio is really your income for living expenses divided by your long-term debt payments. So how long could you survive? If you lost your job, how long could you make those payments? And the larger this number means the more months that you could survive if you lost your job. And then the last one is just your savings ratio. There's 2 of them. There's a savings ratio, and then there's another one called the gross savings ratio. So your savings ratio is just how much are you saving divided by your income available for living expenses, which is just your wages minus your taxes. In the US, it's -1 to 8%. However, I would encourage you to set a minimum of 10%, but I would hope it would be higher than that. And then gross savings ratio. This is a ratio that I made up. Do we pay our tithing on our net or our gross income? Yeah, so it's your gross. Well, I believe it. I always ask the question, would you like your blessings based on the gross or the net? I prefer my blessings on the gross. But this is your total income savings divided by gross income. And that's what my wife and we save between 20 and 35% of our gross income. So typically -1 to 7%. Again, track the trend. So we recommend a minimum of 10%. If you can do better than that, I think it's important. So let's start doing a case. Got Steve and Mary Jo. Yearly income of 50, monetary assets of 5. You can read through this. Let's take 2 minutes, and I'd like you to create a balance sheet for Steve and Mary Jo. How are they doing? Work in your groups. A couple of minutes. This is the kind of questions that are on the quiz. So you can be sure that there's probably something like this on the quiz. Okay, someone want to take me through it? Do we want a little more time? Just out of curiosity, we do 3 financial statements in this class: a budget, a balance sheet, and an income statement. Which of these is for the past? Which of these is for the present? And which of these is for the future? Income statement. Past, balance sheet, budget. Okay, sorry. Okay, let's go through it. Someone want to take me through it here? So what do we have? How much do we have for your assets? Go ahead. Yeah, just you can give me the total first, and then.
Total was 185,000.
And what were the components?
So that was monetary assets, 5,000, house,
Okay.
2,000, 2 cars,
And what did you get for your liabilities?
total we had 131,050.
Okay. So that gave net worth of 54,000. So how are these guys doing?
How old were they?
They're probably in their 30s. I forgot what it's. Yeah. So doing fine. Where's most of their value come? In the house. So that's kind of an interesting thing. Most of their value has come from the house. And if this case was written 3 or 4 years ago, what do you think most of that equity in that house is? Okay. Okay, let's go on to the second one. Let's continue now. So their average tax rate at 15%. How do you calculate how much tax they paid? So 15% times 50,000, that'd give you how much taxes they paid. So if you take the 50,000 minus 15%, that would give you your income for living expenses. 12% of their total income to charity, pay themselves 10%. So I'd like you to calculate their annual income statement using the better method. What does the better method mean? Just pay the Lord first. So you wages minus your taxes, then you pay the Lord, and then you pay themselves. So let's take.
Is there a savings rate, percentage before tax or net tax?
Well, so what we're doing now is just the income statement. But when we get to the ratios on the next case, I'd like you to do it. A savings ratio is before tax, and then the growth savings ratio is after tax.
So that's just assuming that the other numbers is expected per year as well.
Yeah. Yep. So I went through and I calculated what their mortgage payment is and what their car payments are and their college loan is, just to make it easier.
Is that like they make 15,000 together or?
Yeah.
Okay.
50,000 together.
The last slide said when we were looking at a piece, was this a different situation?
So this is different than this is what happened last case?
Yeah, if it said that, let me look. It doesn't matter because last slide all we did is a balance sheet. The income statement had no impact. Last one says they have yearly income of 50,000, so we're saying the same thing. Yes. When I said our personal goal was between 20 and 35% of the gross. Yeah, before tax. I figure we pay tithing on the gross. Why not save on the gross too? And it's been a good decision for us. We don't always make it. We haven't always made it, but.
For the Sudweeks, does the 12% include tithing?
Yes.
Okay.
So that ties operating. Yeah. Okay. Someone want to take us through this? Okay. It's
Their total income equals their total living expense.
okay.
Um,
So what did you start with? What's their income?
Their annual income is $50,000.
Okay.
And then you take out the tax.
Takes out the taxes.
Yeah, and then you got that. And then tithing is 6,000, and saving is 5,000.
Okay.
And then take out those, and you got a total income of 31.5 thousand.
Now here's how I calculated your annual expenses. Here's your mortgage. Here's your college loan interest rate. So, okay. So total income is 31.5. How about your expenses now?
Expense, mortgage is 77.30, and
Okay.
utility and property taxes is 22.70.
Okay.
And for the 6,000, insurance 1,500, college loans 11.60, car payment is like 7.34, and then other expenses 36%.
Okay. So now we have an income statement. So how are they doing now? So they had net worth of $53,000. They're doing really well, aren't they? No. Okay, now they've got an income. What's their? So now we've got an income statement. So now what we do is we will take we've got an income statement and a balance sheet, and what we'd like to do is we'd like to calculate each of those ratios. So here's our third case study here. Calculate their key liquidity, debt, and savings ratios. So, and each of you are going to have to do the 6 financial ratios for yourself. So let's again get back into our groups. Yes?
Before we move on, I just had a question about like when you pay tithing, shouldn't you subtract that from the total income and then find out what your taxes are? Because isn't that considered a tax deduction?
It is. So, but for the purposes of here, that's all just considered part of your average taxes. So.
Once you subtract that, you're not taxed on the whole amount, right? You get like the sum.
Right. So it's actually a deduction. A week from today, we'll actually talk about how that works in the tax framework. Okay. So now I want you to calculate your liquidity, your debt, and your savings ratios. There are 6 ratios. So let's spend a little time. Let me just tell a quick story. I had a student who came into my office this week, and she was concerned. She was right on the edge between a B+ and an A-, and she was like within like 0.3. She says, "You know what? Is there anything I can do?" And I said, I basically said no. And I says, one of the things that was really hard was every time I divided into groups, you were off in your own little world, looking to your own computer. And I said, if you would have been more involved with the group, I might have some incentive to do it. So I encourage you, when I do spend time for us to be in this groups, I do look and I do notice who are the people that are contributing and trying to get along, trying to learn the material. But please know I do observe. Okay, thanks. Hopefully not trying to scare you, but just let's get involved and let's. Right, it's not going to be as obvious. Yes? Correct. Right, anything that has a maturity rate, right, than a year. Yes?
So I'm an accounting major. Current assets, do you include the furniture and automobiles?
Right, anything current is considered 12 months or less. And accounting majors probably should spend less time here because sometimes you read into it and you're worried about AMT.
Well, and that's the problem because, I mean, we're not really trained to think that like furniture, even though it is within the 12 months, that it would be included in the current ratio.
Yeah, and furniture is considered a long term.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
So it would only be the
monetary / current assets is only 5,000.
Okay.
Okay, someone want to take me through it? Again, what we're trying to do, our goal here is we're looking at this couple. They've asked us for help. Our purpose is to help them try to understand, what they're doing, kind of the directions they're going, and also the long-term direction. So it's not just we're crunching the numbers. We want to make some recommendations. So let's start with our liquidity ratios. What is their current ratio? Okay, is that a good ratio? Yeah, so they're doing pretty well there. Okay, so 4.3 times the recommended was 2. So they are relatively liquid. How about their month's living expense covered ratio? Go ahead. Oh, 1.90. Now, why doesn't it cover charity, taxes, or paying yourself?
You don't have any money to
If you're not making any money, it'd be 0. So somewhat liquid, but they could only survive for less than 2 months. Is that a good position to be in? You lose your job, you could survive for less than 2 months? No. Okay, let's go on to our debt ratios. What % of their assets are covered by debt? I got a different number. So total liabilities divided by total assets, 71% of their assets are covered by debt. Is that a good position to be in? No. Long-term debt coverage ratio, how long could they pay their debts based on that? So they can only cover it 2.6 times. So if we take 1 over that, gives us 38% of their take-home pay goes to pay their debts. The debt service ratio is 39%. Is that a good position to be in? Who is the person that says interest? Them that understands it, earns it, them that don't, pays it. So what do you think about this couple? How are they doing as far as the debt side? Yeah.
When you buy a house, is there a certain amount that you should pay? Because if you just get to a mortgage, you're most likely going to be being farmed to that.
Yeah.
Your assets are going to be funding your debt. So is there like a certain...
There are front-end and back-end ratios that banks will not let you go beyond.
But first thing, is there like I should be able to pay half of it before you buy a house or
I don't know that there's individual guidelines, but you probably should set goals on. My view is try to pay it off, and we'll talk about that when we get into the mortgage side. So lots of debt, 71% of their assets. Long-term debt ratio is 2.6 times. It's just above the caution level of 2.5. 39% of their money goes to just pay debt service payments. and just think what they could do if they didn't have, they weren't paying all that on debt. Yes?
So my question is, they have a lot of debt, but they're also saving 10%.
Okay.
Would you recommend they just put that 10% towards paying off debt rather than saving?
What do you think?
That's
Well, let's go on, and then we're gonna make some things. How about savings ratio? What's their savings ratio? Yeah, it's actually 11.8%. So your savings minus your wages minus taxes, what's their gross savings ratio? 10%. So let's go back and let's make some recommendations. So overall situation, current ratio, pretty strong. Living expense coverage ratio, they're pretty short there. Debt ratio, pretty high. Long-term debt coverage ratio, pretty high. Savings ratio. So how are they doing? Elliot?
No, very good. I was gonna say, would it be right, like, the question that they put more of their savings onto like their other expenses? I'd say like their, what is it, month living expenses ratio right now is 1.9, and so it's kind of like a lose-lose situation because they want to have more months, obviously, that they can have that cushion for. But to do that, you need to bump up your savings.
Yeah.
And so.
How long have they been saving this 10%? 1 year. So I think they're beginning to understand. So let's just start with liquidity. They really don't have enough in their monetary assets, so they need to increase that. Monetary assets generally are your emergency fund, and ideally they should set a goal to have somewhere between 3 to 6 months. I think would be a good goal. Again, are they probably spending too much on their credit cards? Yeah. Probably need to cut back on that. And the thing about debt payments is your thing about debt is, when you're paying $6,000 a year in interest expenses, it's pretty hard to get ahead. On their debt, they're carrying way too much debt. They're very close to the danger range of 2.5 times. So normally after 40%, banks will not lend you anymore. So they're right on the edge. Yes?
How often are you personally like doing these ratios for you? Is this like once a month, once a year, once a week?
I've got zero debt.
Or like all of these ratios?
Yeah.
About how?
So liquidity, I'll look. Of course, you know what happened last week. My liquidity side was a little bit on the low side. But once a week when I sit down with Quicken and I go through her, I just get a quick view of what my liquidity situation. I don't have a debt situation, but I also look at what my savings is. So that's kind of my framework there. How about savings? The nice thing is they only begin savings in the last year. They can't do anything about the fact, and I think just hints that when you work with people, if they're doing poorly, at least try to be positive. Hey, look, you guys, you started your savings, you're doing great. Now let's start working and see what we can do. Hopefully, ideally, we'd try to get them to increase that savings. I'd cut down on debt. Dave Ramsey calls, you want to get gazelle intense, with the lions chasing you that you want to get that debt. But the couple here is they're at least moving in the right direction. So try not to be too negative, but we can see things. Again, perhaps, getting rid of one of the cars, reducing or getting a less expensive car. So there's other things you can do. Someone said that all expenses in the long term are variable. They've already got a car, they've paid that, they're probably going to take a big hit. But we need to make those decisions. Some of the biggest ones, the cars and the automobiles at home, that's where we tend to make some really poor decisions. But the good news is, if you just look at the balance sheet by itself, it doesn't tell the story. If you just look at the income statement, it doesn't tell the story. It's not until you bring in the ratios, the liquidity, the debt, and the savings ratio that you get a better handle on it. And so each of you are going to have to do these type of ratios on yourself, with your balance sheet and your income statement, and it'll give you a sense of where you are. So kind of in conclusion, just like to read a note from a current MBA student. He said this: Brother Sudweeks, Ever since my return to BYU last month for grad school, I wanted to thank you for the effect your personal finance class had on me. If you remember, I was in your class that together we watched in horror the Twin Towers fall. So it's been a few years. I don't remember everything from your personal finance class, but I remember the budget template you gave us, and to this day, my wife and I still use it every month. We budget everything down to the penny. We have budget items like personal money, restaurant money, grocery money, dental care, health care, insurance, etc. When Lindsay runs out of grocery money for the month, we eat food storage, beans, and rice until the next month. We have been very disciplined with our budget. After implementing our family budget, we have not once fought over money. Let me tell you a story about how living by a family budget brings peace to our home. One day early in our marriage, Lindsay came home with 3 bags full of new clothes. I immediately blew up and started telling her how much she had spent. I told her that we didn't have the money to be spending so much on new clothes. I made her feel really bad, which in turn made me regret having flipped out so bad. The next day, we got out your budget template and started our family budget. In our budget, we each get new clothes. We each get personal money to spend on ourselves however we choose. Now when she comes home with new clothes, I can't wait to see what she bought because I know she spent her own personal money on them. And in return, it makes her love me even more because how excited I get when she comes home with new clothes. Please know that by living on a budget has made a difference in the world for our marriage. I am currently attending MBA school, and because of the discipline of living by a budget and saving money, we will graduate from grad school with 0 debt. Like we always say about saving money, it doesn't matter how much you make, it matters how much you spend. Please feel free to share this with your class. An apostle said, make $5 spend 6 misery. Make $5 spend 4 happiness. It's that simple. It's up to us. Thanks, everyone.